Kamala Harris was the worst presidential candidate, but the Democrats nominated her anyway. She couldn't win. The polls showed it, the voters knew it, even her own team knew it. So why Kamala? The real answer will shock you. This is Hidden Signal. Let's start from the beginning. On January 21st, 2019, Kamala Harris announced her candidacy for President of the United States. At the time, she was serving as a first-term U.S. Senator from California. Her campaign launch drew significant media coverage and raised over $1.5 million in the first 24 hours. And of course, she had all the winning cards, at least for Democrats: a woman, an energetic ex-prosecutor, and a senator from California. And not just any woman, but of African and South Asian descent. Kamala Harris made headlines during the first Democratic primary debate on June 27, 2019. She directly challenged Joe Biden on his past opposition to busing, a policy tied to school desegregation. Her line, "That little girl was me," landed hard. The moment went viral. Her poll numbers spiked. Donations surged. It looked like her breakout moment had finally arrived. It seemed nothing can stop her. But the bounce she got from the debate faded fast. Throughout 2019, Harris's poll numbers dwindled. She struggled to maintain support among key Democratic voters, especially in states like Iowa and New Hampshire, and even California. Critics said her campaign lacked direction. Even supporters said she was hard to pin down. Her campaign was in decline. Not because of one mistake, but because she never answered the question: what does Kamala Harris really stand for? By December 3rd, 2019, she suspended her campaign. She had not yet made it to the first primary vote. Her campaign cited financial challenges and lack of traction in early states and folded. Despite that, she remained active in national politics. In 2020, Joe Biden selected her as his running mate. She became the first woman, the first African American, and the first Asian American to be elected vice president. But once the celebration ended, reality set in. The Biden administration took office during a pandemic, an economic crisis, and deep political division. And Harris was tasked with some of the most difficult assignments. Immigration was one of the first. In March 2021, President Biden asked Harris to lead efforts to address the root causes of migration from Central America. Not the border itself, but the conditions that lead people to flee. It was a complex long-term challenge, but public perception quickly shifted. Critics, including some in her own party, said she wasn't visible enough. She didn't visit the US-Mexico border until June of that year. And when she did, the optics had already done damage. Then there were her interviews. Some were seen as evasive or awkward. A few clips went viral for the wrong reasons. Internally, reports emerged of dysfunction in her office, high staff turnover, tension behind the scenes. The White House never confirmed those stories, but the headlines stuck. Harris remained active, representing the U.S. abroad, meeting with foreign leaders, and advocating for voting rights. But public approval stayed low. Poll after poll showed her struggling to gain traction with voters outside the Democratic base. By the end of her term as vice president, the pattern was clear. Kamala Harris had history on her side, but public confidence never followed. She traveled abroad, met world leaders, spoke on voting rights, climate change, and reproductive freedom. She stood beside the president, often in silence, sometimes with carefully crafted remarks, but rarely, if ever, did she define the moment. Her approval ratings remained consistently low. Polling across outlets, CNN, Gallup, NBC, showed the same results. Voters didn't dislike her personally. They just didn't believe she could lead the country. Clips of her public appearances still trended, but not for substance. Instead, they raised more questions about clarity, preparation, and confidence. And inside the party, the same concerns kept surfacing. High staff turnover, no defining policy win, no signature achievement, and no clear ideological lane. So when 2024 came, and the Democratic Party handed her the nomination, a vice president with no base, no movement, and 4 years of public skepticism, it shocked more than just Republicans. Even some Democrats quietly admitted the truth. Kamala Harris may have been the weakest major party candidate ever, and she was going to face Donald Trump, who defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016. A former First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State backed by the entire Democratic establishment. She had more money, more endorsements, and more media coverage, and he still beat her. Sure, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, but not by much. He got more votes than any sitting president in American history, and if just a few states had shifted slightly, he would have won a second term, 2024. And Trump is back on the ballot, same message, same energy, and same unpredictability. And this time he's running in a country that's more divided, more frustrated, and more uncertain than it was 4 years ago. So what did the Democratic Party do? They picked Kamala Harris, a candidate who never made it past the primaries in 2020, a vice president who spent 4 years trying to define her role and never quite did. No major policy win, no clear national voice, no energized following. The numbers were there. The public sentiment was clear. Even Democratic voters had doubts. So how does this happen? How does a party with full access to data, media, polling, and strategy make a choice that almost no one outside the inner circle was asking for? Is it just poor judgment? Is it denial? Or is it something else? One thing was obvious. The Democratic Party had no plan B. They had Kamala Harris. And that was it. It wasn't just about poor polling or bad strategy. It was deeper than that. It was detachment. A party so committed to its own echo chamber, it stopped reading the room entirely. They saw Biden's numbers slipping. They saw Kamala's approval never recover. They saw younger voters disengaging, and they did nothing. Because at the top of the party, the real decisions are made by the same people who have been in power for decades. And if you look closely, you'll notice something. There are no new voices, just recycled ones. The same donors, the same consultants, the same control. The younger Democrats, the so-called next generation, don't lead. They echo, they post, they rally, but they don't run the party, not even close. And when Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris as his vice president back in 2020, it wasn't because she was the strongest choice, or the most inspiring, or even the most strategic. It was something else. Kamala checked the right boxes. She wouldn't challenge the system, and most importantly, she would be there, ready to comply in case something happened to Biden. And let's be honest, everyone saw his decline, even the party did. But they didn't prepare for it, because they didn't want to. Kamala Harris wasn't just nominated. She was positioned, not as a leader, but as a placeholder, as someone the Democratic elite could manage, someone they could install without resistance. And if Biden couldn't finish the term, well, they wouldn't have to go through a messy transition or a fight within the party. They'd already have their president, one who wouldn't question, wouldn't resist, and wouldn't lead without permission. Kamala Harris wasn't chosen to win. She was chosen to obey. Let's be clear about something. Kamala Harris is not stupid. She's not uneducated. She's not incapable. And whatever anyone may think about her personality, her tone, or her style, she didn't get here by accident. She earned a law degree, served as district attorney, then attorney general, then U.S. senator. She was sharp, articulate, and with the right time, support, and experience, she could have grown into the role of a serious national leader. But she wasn't given that chance. She wasn't prepared. She was rushed, pushed forward too soon, and placed in one of the most complex, hostile political environments in American history, with no support, no clear role, and no margin for error. Kamala Harris wasn't elevated to succeed. She was elevated to absorb failure. Her potential as the first woman, the first African American and South Asian American president was real, but it was destroyed, not by Republicans, not by voters, but by the very party that she was a part of. The Democratic Party didn't just misread the moment, they weaponized it, because somewhere along the way, they stopped trying to win. And if you think that's dramatic, just look back. Each time they held power, debt increased, borders weakened, inflation rose, housing became unaffordable, corporations got richer, middle class got smaller, censorship expanded, surveillance deepened, and entire generations grew up more anxious, more divided, and more distrustful of government than ever before. Every time Democrats had control, they used it to grow the machine, never to fix it, never to slow it down, but always to expand it. And this time, it doesn't feel like the Democrats lost the election. It feels like they gave it away. They knew Biden couldn't run again. They knew Kamala couldn't win. And they had 4 years to find someone else, but they didn't. They pushed forward anyway. And when the polls collapsed, they didn't pivot. They didn't switch course. They didn't even try to fight. It was like they were watching the house burn down and quietly handed Trump the keys. Not because they believed in him or wanted him, but because they know what was coming. And someone had to be in charge when it all came crashing down. Not them, someone else. So they stepped back, let the storm hit him, let him carry the blame. And that is what worries me the most and should make every American think about. Because when a ruling party decides it's better to lose the election than to govern during the crisis they helped create, it means the worst hasn't happened yet. And they know it. This is hidden signal.